All right, hello, huddlers, and welcome to another Career Huddle, where we introduce you to a best-selling author who can help propel your careers to new heights. Today, our very special guest is Jay Baer. Jay is a Hall of Fame keynote speaker who teaches business growth through customer experience and marketing innovation. He's founded 5 or 6 multi-million-dollar companies and authored multiple bestsellers, including Hug Your Haters, which I loved, and Talk Triggers, which I also loved, and which we did a podcast on, Jay, 5 years ago. So we'll include that link just in case anybody wants to go back to that. Now, his latest book is probably my favorite, and it's not just because even a slow reader like me could consume it in less than an hour on an airplane. So thank you for that favor, a business book that has value, that is less than an hour read. But it's also one other note about Jay. It's really hard to have a conversation with him these days without talking tequila. So we'll get to that as well. So anyway, Jay, how are you and where are you?
I am fantastic, Drew. Great to be back. Nice to see you. Hello, Huddle. I am temporarily at home, off again in the morning for a couple of weeks. I have I think 11 events in 10 days or something. It's a crazy stretch. It's my last really nutsy stretch for the year. So I'm prepping up for that. Delighted to be with you.
Well, I've actually had the pleasure of seeing you be the master of ceremonies at a couple of big events, and you're really terrific at it. And just in case anybody is looking for a master of ceremonies, Jay would be first choice for sure of anyone I've ever seen do that. So kudos to you. And I get why you're on the road a lot, because you are especially skilled at that.
Well, now I do. You mentioned it, and now I've got this thing where increasingly I will come in and do a keynote or be the MC for an event, more so keynotes. And then that night I'll do a tequila education course and tasting for the top sponsors, the top execs, the potential prospects, etc. It's really fun, and my agent loves to sell it because meeting planners like, that's amazing. We've never heard of that before.
Yeah, I love that. So can you just talk about how you go from becoming a marketing and CX guru to being a purveyor of fine tequila?
Very slowly and then all at once. So I'm from Arizona originally. I live in Indiana now, but I became interested in agave spirits about 25 years ago. I lived in the Valley of the Sun, and before I had kids, every Wednesday, my buddy Tom and I would go to a bar in Scottsdale, and we just get tacos and sit at the bar. There's a bartender there. His name is Steve, and Steve was super into mezcal long before it became like a bartender's darling, and really early. Again, this is 25 years ago. But we were just fascinated by the culture and the romance and the different production methods. And we just go every Wednesday and be like, all right, church is in session. Tell us some things. And we did that for a couple of years. And subsequently, then I just got steadily more interested and involved in agave spirits and studied more. I went to Mexico and visited a lot of producers. And then when I sold my consulting firm a couple of years ago, and I stopped recording my podcast, Social Pros, I thought, I've got some time now that I didn't used to have. What if I just tried to teach people some of the things that I've learned about tequila over the last couple of decades? And so I just made a couple videos on Instagram and TikTok, and it started slowly, as you would expect, but then very quickly caught fire. And now we've got hundreds of thousands of people in our audience, and I get recognized in airports every single week. Never for the 6 or 7 books, never for the 30-year history as a CX influencer, only for tequila. And my wife's like, man, you should have done this. You should have done this years ago.
You are the tequila guy now. That's amazing.
For better or worse. Yep.
Yes. And I even actually went to Tequila Jay Baer, almost bought the agave glasses because my wife
pretty cool.
Yeah, they are cool. And my wife is a big fan of agave. Thanks. All right. We are not going to talk about tequila unless it comes up anymore, because we're going to move on to your book, which, by the way, just again, this is how small it is. It fits into the palm of your hand.
It's a booklet.
It's a booklet, but it does come. And I remember I heard you on Douglas Burdett's show, and why you ended up having to put it in 3s, because it's just too hard to ship these. But we're going to skip that. What I want to get to is this series, Career Huddles, is about helping CMOs either get to the next level or succeed. And so here, this is a book that feels like it's a CX thing, but I know it's so much more and so talk about why this concept of the time to win and need for speed is so important and a possible sort of strategic weapon for CMOs to think about right now.
Yeah, and I don't think this is news to anybody here. Increasingly, CX is marketing, because any product or service advantage you have, you probably aren't going to have very long, right? We're living in a world that is increasingly interconnected, and it's very, very difficult to sort of say, we have a better mousetrap and we're going to continue to have a better mousetrap. And so we have a distinct and unique and defensible service price product advantage. It just doesn't exist in the way it did when we were younger. Consequently, consumers, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter, are increasingly making buying decisions based on the experience more so than the thing itself. And that was sort of the genesis for this whole body of work. Coming out of the pandemic, I thought, I think our relationship with time has changed. The pandemic taught us a lot of lessons, but I think the thing it reminded us is that we all have 1,440 minutes a day, and you can't make more, you can't buy more. It doesn't matter who you are. That's what you get. And I will say this, I believe time is the only resource on this planet that we actually share equally. The only one. That being the case, we've all decided to hey, maybe we should pay attention to how we spend those precious minutes. And that's why people don't want to go back to the office. They want to work from home. It's why baseball games are 26 minutes a night shorter now because of the pitch clock, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what we found in the research, and all the books that I've written have been preceded by very comprehensive research, what we found is that indeed the thesis is true. People care about time more than ever, and 2 in 3 customers say that speed is as important as price. Well, if you're a CMO and you believe that 2 in 3 customers think that how fast you are is as important as whatever it is you charge for your product or service, that's something that I suggest you elevate on your list of priorities inside your organization, because your customers already have.
So it's sort of the Amazonization, if you will, of the world on every level. I mean, because they've trained us, right? That, you go in, you hit a click, boom, you bought something. And then sometimes in an hour or two, it shows up. So we've just become accustomed as consumers that we get fast responses. We buy stuff with a click. So from a B2B standpoint, and I don't know if anything in your research sort of pointed where those moments in time where response time really mattered the most.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that.
Well, we asked that specifically because I wanted to have an understanding of whether it's just be fast always or there's some nuance to that. And the reality is, mathematically, it's kind of be fast always. So more than 2/3 of customers want you to exceed their expectations around responsiveness at every node of the customer journey. So unfortunately, there really isn't a place where you can just be like, you know what, we'll get around to it when we get around to it. However, to your point, Drew, it is most egregiously true that customers value and will reward you for responsiveness in any kind of post-purchase scenario. So once they own it, they care more about speed than they do before they bought it, right? So if somebody has a problem, if somebody has a question, that's when they desperately want you to get a hold of them as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, those of you who have not seen the book may be thinking, why is the book so small? I have written 6 previous books, all of them in the more classic book style. And I started writing this book and I'm like, wait a second. I can't write a full-length business book and ask you to spend 5 or 6 hours reading a book about speed. It just seemed like very contradictory to the thesis of the book. So I'm like, look, if the whole idea here is to respect your customers' time, that if you give customers time, they'll give you money. And if you cost customers time, it will cost you money. If we believe that to be true, and I certainly believe it to be true, and the research backs that up, then why don't we just sort of live that thesis in the book itself? And look, I am I am mature enough to admit that most people don't read business books. They don't. They skim them because most business books have a thesis. And then that thesis is repeated 9 to 14 times, just with different examples through the book. Like most business books can be summarized pretty quickly. That's just the truth. So I thought, well, geez, why don't we just cut out the middleman here? Why don't we just give you a book that's like all meat, no fat? And not to mention the fact, I didn't really understand this until we made the book, but there's a secondary benefit, which is just the form factor of this. Like you can put it in a jacket pocket, you can put it in a front pocket. And so when I have these in events and I do book signings or whatever, people love it because they can have the book with them and still go to the cocktail party. It sucks carrying around a full-size heavy business book while you're trying to drink Chardonnay. Just like the whole process is annoying. So I didn't really piece that together till later, but people love the form function. I will say, however, that I've discovered because it's small, it's actually hard to sign them. So that's been one of the biggest challenges for me, is that because you got to like hold it in a hand and then it's a little tricky to sign them, but that's a small price to pay. Oh, Drew had a power surge. That's exciting.
Yeah. So Drew had a power surge. I don't have host levels of Drew, but I can keep going through the questions that we have.
Go for it.
Until he comes back on. I'll just take him off the spotlight now. You said that there's a 2-year window in which brands can capitalize on the customer's need to speed and turn it into.
Let me touch on that. So people ask me, and I should be smarter about introducing it this way, why is the book called The Time to Win? It's called The Time to Win because I believe you have an actual opportunity to use speed and responsiveness as a distinct competitive advantage. This is your time to win. And ironically, the way to win is also about time. Everything we talk about here today, and in fact, everything in this book, will be hilariously obsolete in 3 years. I really believe that because all the recommendations in this book, you're going to do. All of you will do them. You're going to have to. Your customers will simply require it of you. Look, I've been doing this for 30 years now, and the one piece of the customer experience that never stays still is expectations around speed. What was fast 5 years ago is commonplace today. I've never heard a customer in the totality of my career say, you know, I've been thinking, and next time, why don't you guys just do that more slowly? Like nobody's ever said that, right? It's always faster, faster, faster. And so all the things that I'm talking about in this book, you're going to have to do eventually. But if you do them now, while your competition is like, we're fast enough, we don't want to spend time on that, we're going to focus on other things, you have a distinct opportunity. And I think it's about 2 to 2.5 years where you're going to have a huge head start and a huge advantage. The data show very clearly how much customers care about this. And I would argue they care more in B2B than in B2C because time is valued more in B2B than in B2C. And so if you do it now, you will be able to really build a fortress around your own culture of responsiveness that will be very, very difficult for your competition to catch up with. But you've got to start now, because eventually if you wait until the whole category that you're in does it simultaneously, you won't have an actual business advantage. You'll just be drug along kicking and screaming.
So, hi, Jay.
Hi.
I'm back, I think. It's a very bizarre sort of situation on our block right now. Anyway, I gather you've talked about why we're doing. Should we get into how? Mm-hmm. And I know that there are 6 sort of things that you recommend doing, mm-hmm. not steps, but because they're not a progression necessarily, where we can sort of fastify the whole organization. So where do you start?
So the best place to start, well, first, let me say this. I don't want you to think that my advice is to just be as fast as possible all the time, because there are scenarios in which you can be too fast. When you're too fast, it actually reduces trust. So if you need to go in for a hip replacement and you call the orthopedic surgeon, like, hey, I got to get a hip replacement. And he's like, hey, what are you doing in the next 5 minutes? You know, that would be concerning to you, right? It's too fast. So at some level, speed can actually work against you. Many of you are probably familiar with the company Drift, the software company that powers chatbots, etc. Drift intentionally programs a delay into their responses. So if you ask a chatbot something, it's all AI powered, right? So it knows the answer immediately. But they put in the fake ellipsis, so like ... so that your customers be like, oh, somebody's really thinking about this answer. Now I trust it. If it just spits the answer out immediately, then people are like, oh, that's a robot. I can't possibly believe that. They didn't even look at my question, right? It reduces trust. So the same thing that happens in all of our businesses. When you're too fast, it reduces trust. So what you want is the right now, is what we call it in the book, the right now, which is the perfect amount of elapsed time. It's like the Goldilocks zone for every customer interaction. And so the way that you find the right now, and the first piece of the framework, is to perform what we call a got it audit. A got it audit. A got it audit asks you to figure out, how long does it take your customers to get it? How long does it take them to get whatever, right? How long does it take them to get an invoice, or to get an appointment set up with your sales team, or to pay a bill, or to get delivery, or get onboarded, or to get a question answered, or to get help with a problem? Like, how long do those things take? And that sounds like a really obvious set of questions. But when I ask business leaders like you that question, what I hear often is, well, Jay, usually it takes 2 days, but sometimes it can be 4. And if it's over a weekend, it's 5. And if the guy who heads the onboarding team is on vacation, it could be as many as 8. I'm like, whoa, stop talking. That is not data. That is a collection of stories that you've chosen to tell yourself. If you're going to use speed as a competitive advantage, if you're going to find the right now and use the perfect amount of elapsed time as a way to gain and keep more customers, you have to actually know the numbers. You have to actually know the data on this. And in a lot of organizations, the only numbers we really track in terms of responsiveness are handle time, right? How long does it take to actually get a phone call answered, or to get a social media post responded to, et cetera? That's the only part, but there's so much more to it. So the first piece of this is to perform the got it audit, to make sure that you actually know what your baseline is, so that you can optimize against it. Now, that's going to take a little work. You probably have to talk to some other folks in the organization to get that data, but it is very much worth having. That's the first piece of the process.
So let me ask you a question on that. Just thinking about, so there's a number of places where, from a demand capture standpoint, that there are sort of what they call service level agreements between marketing and sales, that a lead will be followed up and a demo request will be responded. And those kind of things are very carefully, if you will, audited and tracked. But I'm wondering about the CMO and their service department and the way they support the organization. Is this the kind of thing where you should also be thinking about your internal audiences and your response time to them?
Well, one
coming through, Jay?
Yeah, one begets the other, right? Like, so the same way that you probably heard people like me say that you can't have a great customer experience without first having a great employee experience, because one begets the other. It works the same way with speed and responsiveness. It is impossible to be outwardly fast to customers and prospective customers if you are not first fast internally between departments and even intra-departmentally. You just can't do it. And in fact, as a practical matter, and I think you all probably have experienced this in your career, in many cases, the front line, or whomever is the first point of contact, wants to be faster, wants to be able to provide things more quickly to the customer or the prospect, but can't because of some internal roadblock or inertia or handoff or some kind of drama that just doesn't work that fast internally. And so, yes, the only way you can really achieve this time to win, the right now premise, is to make sure that you're operating with maximum efficiency and minimal gobbledygook interiorly inside your organization, because especially when you cross department lines, that's where things tend to slow down. Drew's going to ask me what is the second piece.
But go for it.
Yeah, so the second piece of the framework is to answer before they ask. And this one has huge implications for CMOs. The fastest you can possibly be, just mathematically, right, is predictive, is to be able to deliver what the customer or prospect needs before she or he knows they need it. I was in Scottsdale not long ago doing a presentation. I had some time before, so I was at the pool on my Kindle, some fancy resort. I'm just sitting there minding my own business. And the pool attendant comes over and says, here's a strawberry daiquiri. Mr. Baer, you were giving off strawberry daiquiri vibes. And I was like, you're right. I was giving off strawberry daiquiri vibes. You're amazing. You know, that kind of predictive execution is like a magic trick if you can do that. But so often we make customers, especially prospective customers, work so hard to get the information that we know they need. Like, you probably all have some sort of frequently asked questions piece on your website, but I would argue that it's not nearly comprehensive enough. It's not updated often enough. It's not an organic living document in the way that it probably should be. Amazon has this kind of rallying cry, and it's not practical, but I love it as sort of a flag in the ground, which says we should never have to answer the same question twice. Their thesis is if a customer has a question, we need to answer it and then make that information accessible, so accessible that no other customer has to seek it from us. It's just obvious. It's available on the website or somewhere else. And I love that idea. So the second piece of the framework, which really changes how people perceive your speed, is to answer before they ask. If I asked each of you to write down the 25 or even 50 questions that customers have most often about your business, all of you could do it. But then I'd say, great, now how many of those questions can get answered without customers asking you, without them calling or using a chat bot or emailing or anything else? And you might look at your list and say 7. And I would say, what about the other 18? Why don't we proactively answer them? So one of the best ways to be perceived as fast is to just understand what customers need and push it out there so that's more self-serve. And of course, in B2B, we probably all are familiar with this. Many customers, especially younger customers, they don't want to talk to people. Gartner says that half of all millennial buyers in B2B, half of all millennial buyers don't want to talk to a salesperson ever. They want an entirely seller-free experience. They want to add to cart, check out, right? They want to buy B2B the same way they're buying socks. And in a lot of cases, we make that incredibly, incredibly difficult for them.
I think Drew's connection is still quite slow. So I'm going to just read the question that he has about the third component.
Go for it.
Which is respond without answers. So
Yeah.
CMOs have a lot of demands on their time from a range of internal audiences and partners. Clearly, they can't respond to everything they're asked for in a millisecond. What's your suggestion here?
Yeah, so the best way to do, and I will say this third piece, respond without answers, will help you not just in your business, but it will help you in your life. I've been doing this technique very, very consistently for about 2.5 years, and it has really improved my relationships, even with my family, with my mailman, like with everybody. So what happens typically, okay, somebody needs something from you, right? I need something from Joy. I need an answer from Joy. And so I send Joy an email, for example, and she doesn't know the answer. She's got to go look it up or ask somebody in her company or call accounting or whatever. Something has to happen for Joy to procure the information that I have requested. Well, what happens today in almost every case is that Joy gets my query and then does the things that need to be done and then provides the information. Don't do that. Stop doing that. Because the whole time that Joy's getting the info, I am steadily freaking out. I send Joy an email. If I don't hear back for, let's say, 2 days, maybe even a day in some contexts, let's say 2 days though. Here's the talk track that goes through my head, and this is true for all of you. Haven't heard back from Joy. Do I have Joy's email address wrong? Is it possible that my email to Joy went to spam? Did I have a weird attachment or something? Is Joy maybe on vacation but didn't set out of office? Is Joy mad at me for some reason? Should I follow up this email with a call, or does that make me seem sad and desperate? Right? This is like the mentality that everybody goes through. So the better approach is when you get a question of any kind is to say, Joy, great question. So good. In fact, I got to look it up. I'm going to go do that. And then I'll get back to you. Now, this requires you to respond to everybody twice. But the first time you're just saying, I got it. And then the second time you provide what they need. And this has two huge benefits. First, as soon as you say, I got it, it takes it off of their mental to-do list and they put it on your mental to-do list. And that changes the psychology dramatically and massively, massively increases how fast you appear. And then second is it actually buys you more time to provide what is necessary. Because, and this is one of the key findings in the research, time to response is more important than time to resolution. Because the psychology change happens at time to response. So if you can just say, I got it, and teach your teams to do this as well, that's where you get the win.
And so it's thanks. I'm back and electricity's back. Turned out their construction project, they just managed to turn the electricity off for the block. Anyway, we're back. But their speed response was not terrible. It just happened to be in the middle of a recording session. Now, I did hear 95% of what you said. And the key thing that I took away here was, internal requests, and this is true for huddles. And if we see something on our Slack channel and there's a question, even if we don't know the answer, the key is to say, I hear you, I gotcha, we'll get back to you. So that at least you've set an expectation of something, right? And I think that's probably point number 4, if you haven't already talked about that.
Yeah, so the fourth piece of the framework is to set speed expectations. What we found in the research is that the trick here, where you get the business advantage, is when you exceed customer expectations around responsiveness. It's not about raw speed. It's about being slightly faster than they expect you to be. It's all about expectation management. The problem is living in a click a button and everything will come to your house world, right? Click a button, a car, click a button, Thai food, click a button, sex, click a button, like whatever you want, right? Like it's crazy. In that environment, if you don't set expectations, customers will expect everything to happen faster than you can deliver it. And this is very true in B2B. Like it's going to take 2 weeks to onboard somebody, but they don't know that. They just assume you can onboard them tomorrow. And so this is really important for CMOs to have a handle on, is you've got to over communicate how long things are going to take. And importantly, why. You can't just say 14 days. You have to say 14 days because of this, 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 and this. Partially because people no longer are just okay with throwing out a number. And partially because when you think about younger B2B buyers, millennials, and certainly Gen Z, they don't take nothing at face value. Like you could tell my son the grass is green and he'd be like, well, tell me more about that. Right? There's just there's no information like, yep, I believe you just because you said it. That doesn't work anymore. It's just a generational fact. So you've got to go out of your way to communicate expectations in a way that for us, we never really, at least for my age, never really thought about. Communicate those expectations and then buttress that with why does it take that long? Because once you've set the expectations, then you can over deliver on. In fact, my newsletter last week, which is the Baer Facts, I had a story about my friend who's an airline pilot at American. And I didn't even ask him about this. We were just having a beer and he just told me the story, outwardly. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. He said every time air traffic control tells him how long a delay is going to take, he adds 50%. So if ATC says it's going to be a 10-minute delay, he gets on the intercom and says, this is Captain Mendler. It's going to be 15 minutes. So sorry. And then if it happens in 12, good news. It's only been 12 minutes. We're taking off. He's a hero. They absolutely love him because, again, it's not about the time. It's about the expectations. And the best way to win that game is for you to set the expectations. And if you don't, they will always assume it will happen instantly.
And this is so funny because I can see the CMO, so their heads are spinning because sure, they want the speed, they want to promise, but they also aren't the ones necessarily delivering it. So you have to be careful in these promises. But the key thing I heard was not just setting expectations, but explaining them, right? So it's not just, it's set and explain so that they understand and can participate. But at the same time, I'm thinking about so many of the folks in Huddles land and in B2B in general. They have these long, slow sales cycles. They'd love to close the deal in a day. So there doesn't seem to be a reverse here. Like you can't set expectations for speed for your customers to respond. You get to work at their snail pace. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean,
no, I think you can actually. I was having a conversation about this the other day, and it was a professional services firm, and they were saying, a lot of times we say, here's how long it's going to take, but then the customer doesn't give us their copy or doesn't give us their photos or, whatever we need. I think it was a marketing services firm. We can't get what we need to do our job, and then we get blamed for being slow. And so I said, well, it's the same rules apply. You just have to be super overt to say to those customers, here's the day that we need the thing, and which I used to do in my marketing services firm. But to your point, Drew, here are the implications if that doesn't happen, right? So what a lot of firms do is they say, okay, we need your copy by November 15th. But what they don't do is say, we need your copy by November 15th, or you go to the back of the line, right? And we'll pick up your project next year. Right? They don't explain the ramifications, and then they're like, well, they just didn't get it to us on time.
And I think that's once the customer's onboarded, I totally get that. I'm thinking about it's 6 months to get the first. We got through the first stage. We're in the RFP. They called in all the companies. Then the CEO said, wait, we got to get in another vendor in here to even it out. I have a friend who's the CEO of this company. And then the whole process starts again. And next thing you know, it's 15 months. And finally the squeeze is saying, okay, I think you're the winner, but you got to come in 20% lower.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything in your book that fights that. Other than to have been the people that met every single deadline that they said they were going to along the way. So you sort of set a standard of speed and delivery. And that was, part of your promise.
Yeah, I think the way I would maybe work on that, and people do it all the time, is to say, hey, this pricing is only good for a certain amount of time. And if you're going to run us to the ringer, then we're going to change our price. But some of it's just a power dynamic, right? I mean, if you've got more customers than you need, you can play that game. And if you're like, I desperately need this customer, you're probably going to do their bidding at some level.
Yeah.
The power to say no is the greatest marketing attribute you can have.
Okay. So we're continuing through your top 6 sort of ways to develop a time to win program. Number 5 is to close uncertainty gaps.
Close uncertainty gaps. So people hate waiting more than ever. Like we established that. The thing that they hate almost as much as waiting is uncertainty. Because uncertainty creates anxiety, and anxiety typically keeps people's money in their pants. We are guilty, especially in B2B, of big uncertainty gaps, uncertainty chasms. And the way I define an uncertainty gap is it's the difference between what you know about your business and how it works, and what the customer knows about your business and how it works. And increasingly, we've got to close that down. We live in a culture now where uncertainty gaps are being closed for us all the time, mostly by technology, whether we like it or not. You think about something like transportation. I mean, Drew and I are old enough to remember a pre-Uber, pre-Lyft world where you would have to telephone a taxi. And you would say, I need a cab, I'm going to the airport. And they would just say, okay, he'll be by to get you. And that was all the information you were allowed to have. Like, when is he coming? No idea. What's it going to cost? Won't tell you. Which of these identical taxis is my taxi? You're not allowed to know. Massive uncertainty. And now, of course, Uber, you've got the icon, you've got a headshot, license plate, you've got a blood test, right? You've got an ancestry.com printout on this guy. Like, you've got massive information to the penny what it's going to cost. And increasingly, that is happening all around us. And so one of the best things you can do is to make sure that customers understand what's happening along the way, because it changes how fast they perceive you to be. You're not any faster. It changes how they perceive you to be. Now, when I owned a global strategy firm, I realized how bad we were at this. So large companies, mostly B2B, would pay us a bunch of money to create a marketing strategy, a customer experience strategy. And we would take their money and we would go into our workshop, virtual company, and we would build the strategy. And it would take 75 or 90 days. Now, internally, we had incredibly detailed project plans. We knew exactly what had to happen every day to hit deadlines. We did this I owned the firm for 13 years. We never missed a deadline. We knew exactly what had to happen. But what I realize now is that there was a huge uncertainty gap because we were terrible, really I was terrible, somebody to blame but myself, at communicating that fact outwardly to the client. What I realize now that I've done this work is that my customers were thinking, did Jay and his team just steal this money? Are they taking the money and going to Barbados? Is there a strategy? Will there ever be a strategy? Do they not need anything from us? How are they possibly just doing this? What are they doing? And now, if I had to do it over, I would be sending weekly or possibly even daily updates on what's happening with the project, because it reduces all of that uncertainty. And so you can use this in lots of different parts of your business. Certainly pre-sale, also post-sale. It will have a material impact on the psychology of your customers and prospects if you just think, okay, what do we know versus what do they know? And you've experienced the power of this in your own life. Recently, I had to call AT&T, which I don't necessarily recommend, and they're like, okay, we're going to answer calls in the order that they were received. And every time I hear that, I think, what was the second choice of how to answer the calls? Was it that or alphabetical? We weren't sure, but we decided to do order they were received. Why do we need to say this? I just understand what was the alternative. So we answer calls in the order they were received. We expect your call to be answered in 11 minutes. I'm like, okay. Now, I think they did it in 10 minutes because I tracked it, and I felt pretty good about that. But if they wouldn't have said anything, they just said call order they were received, you're in the queue somewhere. If it still would have been 10 minutes, that 10 minutes would have felt like an hour, right? Because time moves very slowly when you don't know what the end state is. So it's one of the best things you can do is to close uncertainty gaps really throughout your whole business, but certainly around response time.
Well, and as you're talking about it, I'm really thinking about, I mean, the number one uncertainty gap that CMOs face is helping their CEOs and boards and investor understand actually how marketing works.
Yes.
And particularly when it's
what's this money going for?
Right? And when they get into a rebranding situation or a repositioning or even a new product launch, there's all sorts of things that need to happen. And often, like particularly a rebranding process, there is a long time where the CMO goes away and comes back. And so I feel like it starts with the interview where you're, filling in the uncertainty gap of how long it takes to actually build a new marketing program and what that takes.
Yes.
So managing and then communicating to all the stakeholders along the way. And I'm thinking of those, sometimes, when you're taking a survey and it says you're 12% done, you're 24% done. Actually, it gives you a sense that, you're moving along. And so there needs to be a similar kind of a thing that marketers use to marketing internally to fill in that uncertainty gap.
Is one of the key pieces of advice in my book, Utility, to market your marketing.
Market it. Okay. Now, we've gone
through
these first 5 ways of setting up your time to win. The last one is super fun, offering a fast pass. Maybe you could share the experience that you had in Vegas, and then let's talk about how that might apply, what this looks like for B2B.
Oh, it applies to everybody. You're all going to make so much money on this one that you're going to be sending Drew all kinds of holiday gifts.
We like
market your marketing, but offer a fast pass. So in the research, we discovered that 1 in 4 customers will pay as much as 50% more to not wait. You should let them do that. You should give them that opportunity. So increasingly, you see fast passes around us, right? Disney has one called Genie Plus. You pay more, you get to go to the front of the line. TSA Pre is a fast pass. Clear is a better fast pass, right? You pay more, you wait less. I was in Vegas and I went to Caesars to do an event, and this is Mr. Baer. It's 2:30. Check-in time is at 4. You come back at 4 and we'll give you keys to your room. Meanwhile, lose as much as you can in the casino. Or, Mr. Baer, we've got a new program. If you'd like to give us an additional $30 now, we can give you keys. Would you like to take advantage of that? And I was like, well, I'll lose more than 30. Sure, here's my money. Give me my keys. And this is the beauty of the fast pass. Not everybody's going to want to do that. Not everybody's going to want to give them $30, but I'm fresh off a cross-continental flight. I'm like, sure, here's my money. 1 in 4 customers will take advantage of this. We should all offer this. The great thing about a fast pass, if you just say, okay, you want to pay us a little bit more, you're the next customer. You're the next one to get onboarded. You're the next one to get the shipment of ball bearings or whatever the deal is, doesn't matter. All you have to do is shuffle your sequence. It doesn't cost you anything to offer a fast pass. All you've got to do is shuffle your customer sequencing. Now, what some people say to me is, well, Jay, okay, I get it. And maybe we can, charge the company 20% more to be the next one we serve. Great. But what happens to the one who was next, who's now second? Like, what do we do about them? Here's my advice. You upcharge 20% the fast pass. It's just pure profit because it's not going to cost you anything more. Then you go to the person that you have to bump and you say, hey, I'm terribly sorry. We have an emergency. I know we told you it's going to be a week, but it's going to be 2 weeks. But we feel terrible. So we're going to give you a 5% rebate on your invoice. Is that okay with you? And 95% of the time, they'll be like, sure, that's fine. They win in their mentality. You win economically. The fast pass people win because they wanted immediate service and didn't think they could get it. And you keep 15% for doing nothing other than shuffling your sequence.
And I can think of ways of applying fast pass in various aspects of what we do for CMO huddles. But I'm curious, when we talked about this a little bit, I think it's hard to wrap your mind around fast pass in B2B. Let's say software as service firms, consulting firms. I mean, there's a wide range of them. And I just wonder if there's another example or another way to think about it so that we can help inspire folks. Because I totally agree. I mean, there's such a win-win here, is particularly when we talked about trying to shorten the sales cycle or shorten the service cycle, right? Which is, getting them on board
that's it. That's
right?
exactly. I mean, in the consulting side, I mean, I am so mad that I didn't think about this when I owned my firm, because I would have been doing this all the time, because we only had, fixed number of strategists and a larger than that number of projects, which is a first world problem to have. And invariably, big companies like Fortune 50 companies would say, hey, we need a strategy, and be like, great, it's going to be 6 months, we're full. And now I'm like, well, that was ridiculous. Why didn't I say, okay, giant company, I'm going to charge you 20% more than we typically would, but you can be next? Like, duh. Like, that would have required literally nothing to do other than me just figuring it out then. Onboarding the same way, especially in SaaS, right? I mean, buying it's the easy part. Implementing it's the hard part. And getting people to actually use it and train the trainer and all that kind of stuff, that's the hard part. That all takes resources on your side, right? And so those resources have to be marshaled and organized, and you can only do so many onboardings at a time. You say, okay, great, thanks for buying this. You want to be onboarded sooner? Okay, we're just going to charge you a little bit more in your invoice to be onboarded sooner. And even on the support side, right? Like, it's pretty typical to have different support contracts based on, you've got phone support versus chat support versus email support, and there's a different tier of pricing associated with that. That is, in a way, a fast pass of a certain type.
So, as CMOs have a lot of stress, and I want to, your book inspired me to think about where there was a time and a service gap, right? And so thinking about that in all different ways and how we could do it. There's, at the same time, folks have to sleep because I could just see the part of the mentality here is, oh, well, the CEO sent me an email. Do I have to respond? Like he sent it at 11:30 at night. Do I need to always be on? How can we do this in a, not be always on and yet still have this time to win from a internal management standpoint?
Yeah, let me take that a couple ways. One, I'm not suggesting this is easy. I'm suggesting this is necessary. Whether you want it to be true or not is immaterial. The fact is, we do care about our time more than we used to, and we will spend money based on how much our time is respected in a way that we didn't used to. Fundamentally, we now interpret responsiveness as respect. And I would argue that's more true in B2B than in B2C. So you, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to do this. It doesn't matter whether you want to. It doesn't matter whether you're happy about it. All these things we're talking about, you're going to do. The real question is whether you want to do it before your competition or after your competition. But I will also say that it is important to understand, and I'll just reiterate it, that the solution here is not just to be as fast as possible for a couple of reasons. One, you can be too fast. And two, it's not about speed. It's about being faster than people expect, right? It's about the psychology of responsiveness more so than actual responsiveness, right? So if you can set expectations and slightly exceed them, even if you're setting expectations for your CEO about what they should assume to be reasonable when they need something from you, and you can slightly exceed those, like my pilot example, right? That's how you kind of win that game. So a lot of this, again, even something like respond without answers, right? It doesn't take you any more time to do that. You're just saying, I got it, right? Which changes the psychology of speed more so than the actual speed.
I see that as an important distinction. I also see a lot of folks using auto reply in the off hours, right? Because that would be a simple way of saying, hey, I'm sleeping. It's 10 to 8 in the morning. I promise.
Yeah, the nice thing is with AI, those kind of auto replies are going to get a lot smarter, right? It won't just be I'm sleeping. It'll be like, okay, the AI can say, I got it in a more nuanced and believable way, right? So the good news, I think it's good news. Let me ponder this. The neutral news is that on one hand, technology and AI will continue to increase how fast people think you should be. And that genie's not going back in the bottle. But also technology will make it easier to be faster anyway, without as much effort on your behalf, right? So I think that part will be a fair fight.
Okay. All right. Let's wrap up with 2 do's and 1 don't for B2B CMOs applying the need for speed framework. 2 do's
and 1 don't. So the first do would be, I think, to fundamentally understand that this can be a business advantage, right? That customers have already changed their thinking around this, right? They want you to be faster, and that this can have a material impact on customer acquisition and customer retention. So the first do is to just understand the research, which you can get at thetimetowin.com. I don't even ask you for an email address. I just want you to have it, because it really is, I think, the most foundational research ever on this relationship between responsiveness and revenue. And you'll see the research has a lot of stuff we didn't get a chance to cover here today to help you understand that this really is a movement in terms of what customers expect and why. So that's the first do. Second do, I think, is I would really start with that idea of the got it audit. Like, if you're going to build a culture of responsiveness in your organization, which is really what we're talking about here, is a culture of responsiveness, you can't really do that based on anecdote, right? Based on story. You have to work with other people inside your organization to get a better handle on your actual speed, and then be able to do the things we've talked about here. If you don't know what's happening today, you're not going to be able to be better at it tomorrow. It's true of anything, right? So I think doing the analytical part and just using that as the baseline is probably the second do.
And a don't?
A don't. A don't is to be disheartened and thinking that you've got to do all these things at once. Here's the good news. Your competition's not doing this. Your competition thinks they're adequately fast. Your competition hasn't read the research. Your competition hasn't read the book. Your competition believes that it's too much effort to lean into speed. They don't think it's worth it. They don't understand that consumer psychology, both B2B and B2C, has materially changed. They just don't get it. So you have an opportunity to do these things a little at a time, as opposed to have to do them all at once. I do believe you've got a 24 to 30 month head start. That means you've got to get rolling, but you don't have to do it all at once. So don't feel like this has to be like this massive weight on your shoulders. That's not what it's intended to be. But I do think if you chip away at it over the next, say, 2 or 3 quarters, at the end of that, you're going to be like, wow, we really have something here. And your competition is going to say, how did they pull that off?
I love it. All right. Well, my big takeaway, responsiveness equals respect. Responsiveness equals revenue. Thank you, Jay Baer. Where can people find you?
You can find me at jaybaer.com or thetimetoWin.com, which I put in the chat, which has the research and links to the book and all that kind of stuff. And it's Tequila Jay Baer, Instagram and TikTok, if you got any questions.
All right. And are we going to see a Jay Baer tequila brand anytime soon?
I actually just came out with a single barrel tequila, working with a brand called Primo. I don't know that I would do my own brand just because there's now almost 2,000 tequila brands.
Yeah.
And I would rather not lose all my money.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Jay. Really, really a pleasure.
See you
to
later.
see you.
Thanks, everybody.